War. No, stop it. Conflict. There are a lot of theories on what causes it. Sometimes it's national security, sometimes it's an attempt to spread a certain ideology, but more often than not, it's about something else entirely. Or many things at once. Because unless you work for a major arms manufacturer, you probably think war is a bad thing, there are also many theories on how it can be prevented. For example, France and Germany have had a spotty history at best, so they decided to become BFFs, and invite all their other friends to the BFFs club too. In the 2nd century, when the Romans looked at the Scottish and thought, nah, we'll be alright without that specific strand of crazy, they built a knee-high wall to keep them out. There are some other weirder traditions, like whatever this is on the India-Pakistani border, but in fairness, that clearly isn't the best strategy. Besides practical measures, there are some more abstract theories on how conflict can be prevented. One of the most surprising of which revolves around a multinational corporation with a penchant for giving you diabetes, and just really crappy toys. But does the theory hold up? Can having a McDonald's really prevent a war? Unless you're somehow viewing this video from inside of North Korea, and who knows, maybe Kim likes barely educational, barely funny YouTube videos. You probably already know what McDonald's is. It's the $21 billion a year company that sells a whopping, McMazing 75 burgers a second. There's a site that's sole purpose is to count the amount of food McDonald's has sold in any given time. For example, since the start of this video they've served 7,200 burgers, which also means they've slaughtered 76 cows and about 6,000 kids have been scared by this nightmare creation. As a proud ex-sandwich artist, I've got to mention that McDonald's is actually only the 2nd most common fast food chain. Subway, with its nearly 42,000 locations, even has a restaurant on St. Kitts, an island that can be measured in length by just 1.5% of the Subway sold daily around the world. But what do I mean McDonald's prevents war? Well, obviously just eating a Big Mac doesn't make you immune to an FGM-148 Javelin infrared-seeking missile, but man, would it be useful if it did? This theory is the work of Thomas L. Friedman, who describes his high school years as one big celebration of Israel's victory in the Six-Day War. Oh, cool guy. In 1996, he wrote an article in the New York Times claiming no two countries that both had a McDonald's had fought a war against each other since each got its McDonald's. In his book The Lexus on the Olive Tree, he entitled this theory the Golden Arches Theory of Conflict Prevention. Presumably because McDonald's would sue anyone to oblivion that used their name and war in the same sentence. Unfortunately for Friedman, in the same year that he released his book, NATO bombed Yugoslavia, reportedly causing the destruction of the McDonald's in the country, and kind of disproving his theory. Although NATO obviously isn't a country, but made up of various countries, many of which at the time were homes to Ronald and friends. Since Friedman released his theory to the world, people have been trying to prove him wrong, and arguably they've been pretty successful. People have pointed to the 2006 Israel-Lebanon war, but Israel was technically fighting Hezbollah, not the Lebanese government. India and Pakistan have had various skirmishes since they both built McDonald's, but these are generally contained within their disputed territories and don't encompass what most people would think as all-out war. Even more recently, the Crimean conflict has people saying that Friedman was talking rubbish. But in theory, at least according to them, and I mean, who wouldn't trust this guy? Russia wasn't technically directly involved with the conflict, and neither country was ever at war with each other. Best case for this theory being false is the 2008 Russian-Georgian War, where Russian forces were directly involved in the invasion of areas of Georgia. But tell most people that and they would ask why Russia would want to invade the Peach State. Maybe to free them from a liberal regime. In the face of all this evidence, Friedman rebutted the proof like a YouTube prankster, by saying he was only joking. He says his theory was just tongue-in-cheek, but the idea behind it still stands. That capitalism and being part of the global economy should cause world peace because any country developed enough to play a role on this stage would be too scared that war would send their development and economy spiralling. Like a Hollywood producer trying to wring the last dollars out of the public, Friedman released a sequel to his Golden Arches theory. This time he asserts that no two countries that are both part of a major global supply chain will ever fight a war against each other as long as they are both part of the same global supply chain. He named this theory the Dell theory of conflict prevention, named so because of Dell's vast supply chain, and because the book was published in 2005 when people were still actually buying their computers. Unfortunately for Friedman, there are some glaring issues with this theory too. With the recent Huawei ban in the US and other rising tensions between the US and China, while no one's declared war on anybody yet, it seems that clear that these countries aren't overly bothered about their interconnecting supply chains. It's also worth mentioning that nearly 100 years earlier, a man named either Norman Angell or Norman Angell outlined a very similar theory in his book The Great Illusion. And despite him winning a Nobel Peace Prize for his work, even he didn't see the next 4 decades of terrible conflict coming. There's also some argument to be made that conflict is now very rare explicitly between 2 large economies. But with the last few decades of proxy wars and the fairly recent prevalence of hacking and cyber warfare, there are conflicts constantly between these world powers, and they're just not as in your face. Another journalist, George Monbiot, has a theory almost directly contradicting Friedman's. He calls it the Golden Arches theory of decline. And to summarise his points in a far less eloquent way, he says that the stage of capitalism McDonald's franchises represent is one which corporations have too much power over politics. They're taking the discussions meant for the public view behind closed doors into fancy offices and overpriced restaurants, with gross foods like caviar and foie gras. The lobbyists of these corporations have been able to have a much larger say in affairs of many countries than any one citizen has ever been able to. For example, I can't show you this early cartoon of Mickey Mouse without being scared of copyright enforcement. Even though he should have originally come into public domain in 1984, but Disney managed to lobby so hard that they changed copyright law so they now won't lose copyright on the character until 2023. So I mean, expect some attempted changes to the law coming up soon. However, this is a relatively trivial outcome of lobbying compared to what the tobacco, oil and car companies have been doing for years. To really drive the point home, US President Roosevelt warned in 1938 that democracy is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of private power to a point where it becomes stronger than their democratic state itself. That, in essence, is fascism. And you know he's important because Robin Williams played a wax figure of him in that one movie. So it seems possible that not only was Friedman's original theory at least somewhat flawed, but the presence of McDonald's can actually spell the end of true democracy in a country. So once again, Iceland seems like the right place to move. But then again, where would I get my McSpaghetti? Wait, what? Let me know in the comments below what you would do with a copyright-free Mickey Mouse. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content. And as always, if you have been, thanks for watching.